Yeah, I would like to start by thanking PEN for the opportunity to present some of our work here. And today I will tell you a bit about alternatives for pesticides in cereals and arable crops in general. Well, if we look at the use of pesticides, then they are, as the name already implies, used to control pests. But the problem is that they're not very selective, so they also kill any beneficial insects that may be present in the system. And these beneficial insects have an important role to play in suppressing pest populations. So if you take them out, you actually generate pest resurgences, and that means you need to use more pesticides. If you use more pesticides, there is a bigger chance that you will generate pesticide resistance, so the pest becomes resistant to the pesticide, and that means that you will need even more pesticides to control the pests. And this is a negative spiral, a vicious circle that farmers are often faced with. From my experience over the last decades working with arable farmers in northwestern Europe, I would say that about 50% of the insecticide treatments that are being used, and that's probably still a conservative estimate, are not necessary, meaning that farmers use pesticides either preventatively or when there's no real pest pressure present, or they use calendar spraying where they actually use pesticides on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. If you look at this cartoon, everybody would say, well, this is a ridiculous situation. Nobody's going to call the fire engine if the house is, unless the house is on fire. But that's exactly the situation that we're in many farming systems, that pesticides are being used even though there is no reason for an intervention. We all know from the example of antibiotics that it's not a smart thing to do to be using antibiotics preventatively, and that you should keep them for those conditions, those situations where they are really needed. And that's also the same for pesticides. Pesticides have a role to play, in my opinion, but they should only be used as the ultimate, in ultimate cases where other solutions from the IPM toolbox have proven not to work. And that's part of what is known as the IPM pyramid, where it's visualized that you have all these other tools and you start off at the bottom, and only if everything fails, chemical control is there as an ultimate solution. What we also see with the IPM triangle is that monitoring is an essential part on which the whole pyramid is being based. If you don't do monitoring, you don't know what your pest or disease problem actually is, and then the whole idea of IPM falls apart. Sadly, though, if you look at what farmers are doing, monitoring is very uncommon in European farming. I would say that just a small percentage of farmers uses monitoring, and the rest uses preventative spraying or calendar spraying, as I mentioned. Well, if we were to do monitoring, as I already said, we can save at least 50% of the insecticide treatments in cereals, and thereby scouting or monitoring would save the farmer time and money because he doesn't have to buy the chemicals. Also, by avoiding unnecessary pesticide application, scouting saves the beneficial insects from being killed. And these beneficial insects are present in the agricultural systems, but their presence is not on the radar of most farmers. If you look at a hectare of arable land, and these are estimates that we obtained from various experiments, you can say that approximately 20,000 parasitoids might be present, 5,000 ladybirds, 5,000 hoverflies, and 3,000 lacewings. And these natural enemies represent a value. They represent a value to the farmer in protecting his crop, but they also represent a value if you were to need to replace them. I work for a company that produces these insects, so I know what the cost of these insects is. And these 20,000 parasitic wasps, they would cost you about €500 if you were to replace them. The ladybirds, €700, the hoverflies, 2,000, and the lacewings, 60. So if you add this all up, on a hectare of arable land, you would have more than €3,000 in natural capital. As I said, this is not something which farmers have on the radar, and farmers also don't realize that by using these pesticides preventatively, when they're not really needed, they actually kill off these natural enemies, so they burn their natural capital. We can also take a different approach. We can try to stimulate those natural enemies, those beneficial insects, by creating a landscape that is conducive for them, that provides the resources they need. Well, we all know that pollinators, like the bees on the left here, require flowering plants to survive. What few people know is that almost all insects that are important in pest control also require flowering plants for part of their life cycle. And so we can create flower mixtures that are specifically targeted to those insects that provide natural pest control, and thereby selectively stimulate these insects. So this way we can create a positive spiral where we, through the flowering plants, generate more natural pest control. That means that there's fewer pests in the crop adjacent to the flower strips. Means that there's less need for chemical intervention, and that in and of itself is a further stimulant to the development of natural pest control. And we, of course, also by reducing the pesticide use, have a positive impact on biodiversity in general. Does it work? I mean, this is something which we have been working on for decades, as I mentioned. And here an example of a project, a large-scale project that we initiated in 2004 in the Hoekse Waard, and that has become a success story for the European arable farming. In the Hoekse Waard, we have introduced these flower margins in a total of 500 kilometers of flower margins through this area. And this was then monitored by us intensively at the beginning of the project. So looking at 2005, 2006, and 2007, we monitored aphids in a number of crops. And on the left, it's potato. On the right, it's wheat. If you look at the right, we see that the aphid numbers in the wheat over the years declined steadily. And at the same time, on the bottom of the graph, we see that the predator numbers over the same period of time went up. So this clearly indicates that the predators had a role to play in the reduction of aphid pressure in these crops. Well, this project of the Hoekse Waard has been continued since, and the farmers actually created a cooperative to be able to continue this project. And we have seen that over the almost 2 decades now that this project is running, we've seen a 90% reduction in insecticide use in wheat and potato. So this really is a good example of how these landscape management projects can work. This has also been followed by similar projects in other countries. I've been directly involved in projects in the UK, Switzerland, Germany, and in Belgium. And there we see similar good results. Just a few results from the UK, where we looked at the beneficial insects in the flower margins, those are the blue bars, and grass margins as a control are the green bars. We see clearly that these flower margins increase the number of beneficial insects that you can see there. And that spills over then into the crop. And you see that there's far less aphid pressure next to the flower margin here as compared to the monitoring of aphid numbers next to the grass margin. The field was 100 meters wide, so in the center of the field here, it's at 50 meters from the flower margin. You still see a clear, significant positive impact from the flower margin. The yield, that's obviously something that farmers would be interested in as well. And here we were able to show in several years that the yields can be significantly increased next to the flower margin as compared to the grass margin, and it's an increase here of about 12% in yield. Well, you may say, yeah, the farmers need to dedicate or sacrifice part of their land for these flower margins, but farmers are smart and they typically take those parts of the land which are not very productive or not very easy to access with their machinery, and as a result the impact on their productivity is minimal. And finally, I would like to share some results with you from a trial we did in onion this year, where I worked with a conventional farmer that was using chemicals to control onion trips. And I asked him to have this corner here of his field and asked him not to spray pesticides there. Instead, I actually applied pollen twice, which is a way of providing food to the beneficial insects that can control the onion trips. In the back of you now was a flower margin which ran all along the field, so both the chemically treated as the non-treated. At the end of the crop, this is how it looks like. We see that in the chemically treated part, the whole onion crop has been burned as a result of trips damage. So even though there was 6 insecticide treatments, the trips nevertheless did this damage. Whereas in the part which was not treated by insecticides at all, we see that the plants still look green and healthy. And this also translated into yield. We saw actually a 15% increase in yield in the non-treated part of the crop. And of course this part of the crop also had a reduced cost because the farmer didn't have to go out 6 times to spray pesticides. And the explanation for this difference are the natural enemies. These natural enemies were present in the unsprayed part of the crop. We see here mainly lacewings eggs. We also see spiders, and what was the most important predator is Aeolotrips, which is a predatory trips. And this example, I think, shows you that you can, by avoiding unnecessary pesticide sprays and doing scouting, you can actually reduce the use of pesticides, and you can actually improve the yield of your crop as well. Thank you.